Dan. My question is for Elizabeth or is Dan,
Yeah.
a student, either one. Dan, how old were you when you got your first phone?
Oh, do I need to, like, can you hear me? All right?
Sure, and then maybe just for the video. So Dan, how old were you when you got the first phone?
I was in 7th grade, I think, so about 12 years old. And before then, I had an iPod or an iPad, but so pretty much for like half of my life, I had access to the internet.
What rules did your parents have?
Did you have rules? Like rules for engagement with the phone?
Yeah, so I guess rules, mostly just based off of trust. And my parents would check in on, I guess, what I was searching on the internet, what kind of videos I was watching. Not necessarily like my conversations with my friends on like text or something like that, but what I was searching, what I was watching, yeah, my parents had an idea of what I was looking at. But mostly, I'd say just trust. They kind of laid out I knew what I wasn't supposed to be looking at. They made that very clear. And they had conversations, as awkward as they might have been, about what I shouldn't be looking at and what's okay to be looking at.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jeff.
thanks.
Somebody else follow up to that or freestanding? One of the things while you're working on the next question, I want to highlight is in those packets. I hope everyone grabbed one of those. There's a number of good resources that are available. Besides knowing who the presenters are, there's so many things that are out right now. Oh, thank you very much. Including one of them that we highlighted was a book that came out a few years ago called Glow Kids, about the social media. Just so many levels of it. Really a great resource. There's a number of books also about more, so those of you that have littles, God forbid, what happens if they do see something when? It's not if these days. Yeah. The studies are out there. What happens when they see something? How do they respond? How do we respond as parents, as adults?
I would just ask a simple question for all of us of a certain age who can come up with a really easy answer to this would be, when did your parents expect you to come in from playing outdoors? Why did the street lights come on? It was a pretty universally recognizable thing, right? The street lights come on, I come in, parents would have some parameters and guidelines, right? Well, when did the street lights come on for the internet? And they can, if there are parental controls and proper handling of that, and if you don't have mastery of parental controls for the devices for your children, get some, or get somebody to help you with it. I just suggest that very, very strongly, so that you don't end up with your kids staying up till 3 in the morning and et cetera.
There's 2 resources right there in the resources packet on the back page. Covenant Eyes is the one that I'm most familiar with. I've just learned about Canopy, which is another. I don't know if one is better than the other, but both are good tools out that are available now. Those are both on the back, and both have like free trials to test them out. Michael, who are you? Who's your question for?
So I'm Michael Pierce. I'm from Hubleton. This is more of just a comment. If it generates some discussion, great. But I feel like when we talk about giving kids phones, everyone jumps immediately to the idea of a smartphone. I'm 18. I have a track phone. Mom gives it to me when we go to places where we might get split up, like where are we meeting back? Because what is a phone for? It's for communicating.
One of their. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's a really good point. I would throw a couple things out. Motivation. I've seen many excuses over the years of why parents give their kids a phone. So often it's, what if I need to get a hold of them? And my answer is often, they're in school. If you can't get a hold of them, there's a problem with your school, not with your child needing a phone. So that's one of the if you dug down just a little bit, you're going to find out that's not the reason. I grew up without a phone. My parents could reach me when they needed to. The reason is because everybody else has one. That's number one reason. Number two reason is, well, if I don't have one, then I won't be like everybody else. And it's something inherent in the parent that they don't want their child to be an oddity. They don't want their child to be left out. And it's an understandable concept, but unfortunately, it can translate over into something that the parents should be a lot more attuned to. And your point is absolutely right, but it's most often an excuse.
Who else? Carolyn, who are you?
I'm Carolyn Pierce. This is not my son. I'm not the mean mom. I don't know any of those people you mentioned, Elizabeth. Good. None of them. I never get on social media. I wish I didn't. And I said, I just started subbing. I have another career, but I started subbing in the schools, and it is, as I was talking, like, if you really know that that's the danger out there, I was just saying to someone, in my era, I heard someone say, if someone walked through your front door and said the things or did the things on TV that your kids were seeing, you'd throw them out the door. So why don't we turn off the TV? So I said, okay, no more TV, right? Because that's what I would do. And if we know this, why, as John says, why are we giving our kids access to this stuff? Most of these kids that I'm teaching, they come into school, and you said it, they sleep the whole day because they're on their phone all night. I mean, even my kids didn't get one. They had track phones until they were old enough. And I really believe that if you give your kids that grounding and you teach them, as Dan said, talk to them constantly, you know, there's other things to do. Elizabeth, I am that family. We have chickens. We have some sheep.
Shoot, I was gonna mention that later. Darn it.
Get them outside. Get them doing something else. It is a ton of work. You're right. Like every Friday night, we have kids over. You gotta give your kid an option, right? But but why would you let them?
Why do you need chickens when you can have Angry Birds?
I don't understand. Like, why don't we all just band together and say, we are different, right? Being Catholic has always been hard. It's always going to be hard. You're always going to be different. You're always going to go against the current. And that's how you teach your kids, right? And then when they get it, they go crazy for a couple of years, but they come back to you and they say, you know, I'm really glad I didn't get addicted. And we know it's not just the content. There's tons of evidence out there that it's the medium. They're doing things to your brain. And the developers know it, and they get these kids addicted.
That's why the developers.
That's why seminarians have the first year of seminary now, they have no social media. 3 hours a week they're allowed to have their phone, because even the seminarians going to seminary now are addicted to their phones, and that doesn't make a very good priest. And they have a new year now. All the men lose their phones. They have certain hours. And they all say it's the best thing that ever happened to them. They can look each other in the eye again. They can have conversations. Sorry. I'm like Elizabeth, I'm a ranter.
Really good company. This was something that my sister sent me, and I forgot to mention it in my talk, but this is from her boarding school, right, where there are international students, kids from all over the place. She said, we give a phone challenge in one of my classes. Hand in your phone for 10 days and get hefty extra credit. All but 2 of these kids did it in 2 sections, and all bolded, of course, my sister. This is a boarding school. They were fine, they were safe, and most importantly, so many said we actually liked it. We slept better, we didn't know what was going on, so we didn't care. And you mentioned Exodus. I had a student who did Exodus, and he loved it. He did it one Lent. He's like, I don't even miss it. It's so good to
You know where Exodus came from?
There's a mention of Exodus. It's been a program over the last several years that it's pretty ascetical, radical. You might call it spiritual boot camp for 90 days. And its origin, I mean, in that 90-day boot camp, there's like a very serious fasting, regular ascetical behavior, setting aside any and all social media except if it's really strictly limited to work-related stuff. No digital entertainment. One of the toughest things I did Exodus. I mean, the toughest things, the cold showers. We had no hot showers for the first 90 days, etc. So just physical, etc. But it originated at Mount St. Mary's Seminary as a response to the need for guys to work through and get themselves weaned from an addiction to social media and electronic devices. And there was a radical response to that, and it's really having a great effect for many.
I was just gonna say, we don't have a lot of access in my house to technology, and that's curated purposely, because there is the addiction issue, and my kids have seen how it's affected other people of their family. My eldest has a phone for communication because she's home alone a lot. Landlines are so expensive, so there's the phone there, but my kids are more excited to have walkie-talkies than anything else.
They are cool.
Especially my oldest, she's learning, she doesn't like have to pay to replace her phone, cause that's where we've gotten. It's been replaced 4 times this year, and it's always so far involved a goat shattering it.
To like that.
So the walkie-talkies is becoming more of a favorite communication device because, you know, you can drop it, you can fumble it, you can go out in the field, play in the mud, fall in the river.
So your recommendation is introduce walkie-talkies.
You have 20-mile radius.
It's amazing.
How far away
Love
is
it.
your kid going?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Seriously.
Nice. Super cool.
They have 20-mile radius, 50-mile radius, like.
Nice. Thank you. That's great. I saw another hand too. Oh, a couple. Lisa.
I just have a question for Dan, which is, I would love to hear more about your, I teach college students too, and I teach in a way that I have very, I see them every day, or every week for 4 years, so I have this like very familiar relationship with like 20 students, so I see this a lot, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about the effects of social media on like body image, and like has that been something that you've seen in your peers?
Good question. Personally, for myself and my friends, close to my friends, I was prepared to field this question, so I asked around, and my friends said not really, but just observing my peers, I can see it having an influence on them, especially social media. For a lot of people, their self-image is solely based upon how many likes they get, this week, or solely about how many followers they have, and that's really destructive, because as we've spoken about all this whole talk today, is that's not real life. And I also see the effects that has on just the ability to communicate one-on-one and face-to-face. Social skills, I struggle with it. I notice the more time I spend on my phone, the less likely I am to go out and be social, the less likely I am to want to go out and be social. And then even parties or get-togethers, you're bound to see half of the room on their phone scrolling through, not truly present. So I'd say, yeah, I see that issue just about every day, I guess.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, as like a, you're a guy who's very highly skilled at one thing. Like you've been doing, you've been studying and everything, like working towards a degree, and I find teaching in higher ed that students are so much more interested in the idea of things than the things themselves. Like if you have to go to practice every day, you have to really go to practice, but whenever we have access to so much YouTube and so much information, we can sort of start to feel like we're going to practice when we're just watching the practicing happening. You know what I mean? Like there's this sort of disruption, and it's very pervasive, and that kind of pervasiveness can happen so young, like from just like the earliest stages. I have a 3-year-old, and I already see that pervasiveness. Anyway, just I don't know if that triggers any sort of conversation in you, but.
Oh no, I'd agree. I mean, it's because it's almost easier. I feel like it's easier than actually going to practice and actually doing that. You get the immediate like dopamine rush, right? We've all heard about that, and that's again just personally for me. Is my parents always kind of tried to make sure that I had like that kind of outlet, some type of other outlet. For me, growing up, it was sports, and recently the guitar, something like that, something positive. So you're not just scrolling mindlessly, yeah.
Oh, okay. I saw I got 2 short ones. We got a hard stop. We got Maria and Lisa. I saw you first, and then we'll come back to you to finish up. Okay.
I have 2 older kids, they both have cell phones. I have 2 younger kids, they attend Siena, and, you know, I have actually thought of this a lot before this, you know, seminar here has come up. I have, my older of the 2 younger children is already saying, when can I get a cell phone? And so I have prayed about this, and I am, you know, in the midst of it right now of how do I distract? Yeah. How do I distract my child to long-term wise not want a cell phone? We play board games, you know, we go outside and play in the, well, now snow. We do, you know, but I'm like, is this enough? You know, is this enough to get them not to have a desire? And they both attend Siena Academy. I believe a lot of the children here, or none of the children have cell phones, I'm pretty sure. My daughter went to public school last year, and so that desire was already happening. She'll be the only one in 5th grade not to have cell phone. And she knew that I wasn't going to give her one, but I couldn't keep her, you know, it's hard to keep her away from that desire.
I'd say the desire, you're not going to keep them from the desire because I want to look at my phone. It's designed for that, but just because one has a desire doesn't necessarily mean that the desire needs to be granted. My gut says up front to say that there needs to be limits. There's a reason why we're not, and
Yeah, the flip phone rather than a smartphone.
but that won't satisfy. I mean, I'm sure there will not. I know I want to get in here. Anybody else on the panel? I don't want to cut anybody else. You got something to add to?
And may I interject too? I feel decently well versed in all of this, and I'm thinking, well, educating the children.
You'll never convince. As far as I'm concerned, you're never going to convince the kid to agree with you. I think that the idea that oh, now I've seen the error of my ways, mother. Of course, I don't really want the glowing light box. Well, those words are not going to come out of their mouths. but eventually the realization, and honestly, what worked in my family was I love you too much. No, you're not ready.
Say, oh, you want to learn how to play the piano?
So I have a quick follow-up question, very quick, but video games, they want to play video games.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's some family-friendly ones, but should I not go there with, you know, with this topic, with this discussion?
It's a rant for me, so I'm not gonna talk.
Oh.
Parents, I would just leave it at this.
Yeah.
I'm not a video game expert, but I know enough. And I just, parents, you are, just leave it, you are the gatekeeper. So be a gatekeeper. And if you need to be able to sign off on what your kids are, you have the right to know what your kid has access to and what they're seeing and what they're engaging with. And be the gatekeeper. You'll know what's appropriate or not for your child.
There's, I mentioned something about content and other considerations. Video games, primary concern would be content, but that secondary concern, and the Globe Kids goes scarily through it, is what's happening to their brains while they're doing this. I'm still convinced that video games can be harmless fun in a very specific context. Obviously, content, number one, but the other thing is very strict parameters about time of day, about all those things. If you went that way, I'm of the opinion that it can be a form of entertainment that is like other forms of entertainment, relatively harmless.
We'll continue the conversation as you see fit. I'm not kicking anybody out. I'm going to ask Marie her question, and then we'll have a closing prayer, and then hang out as long as you like. Go ahead.
Sure. My question, I guess, is for Dan and Father Riley. Thinking about how you mentioned at parties, people even looking at their phone. I have children from 21 to 2,
And when my eldest, we gave her a phone because she was babysitting and needed a way to connect. Nobody had landlines anymore. And she never used it until she went to college. And she would awkwardly be standing in public spaces and everybody else was like this. And she was like, So she started looking at the phone to not feel awkward and more. And my question is, do you see a real difference? I mean, and maybe it's hard to appreciate if it's the only experience you've had as a young person, but a difference in the deepening of relationships between people, both friends and, college students, but then also marriage someday? Because I feel like with the phone, you can have a conversation with someone and you enter that moment of awkward silence where you both might just sit and be, But if you have a phone, you can quickly disconnect and go somewhere else and not deepen your relationship at all by sitting through that quietly and then moving forward. You can just go somewhere else mentally. And I wonder, so both college relationship, but then also someday marriage, that must be a real challenge to work through as a couple.
No, it is a challenge. And I myself I've caught myself doing exactly what you said, trying to get myself out of a situation I didn't want to be in just by scrolling through my phone or being at a party and being the person that's on his phone. And that's something I'm trying to work on. And I think kids my age, I'm 20 years old, kids my age are starting to realize this and starting to be this isn't as much fun. Getting to know you personally is so much better. I play football at St. Lawrence, and so a lot of our time spent interacting is without our phones. And those are the closest bonds I've made on this campus. So I'd say, I do think that I've personally felt it from my own failure, that having the phone on me, it does take away from your ability to really deepen and connect with other people.
Silence is the perfectest herald of happiness. It's a line of Shakespeare that always goes back to me. One of the challenges that we're dealing with today is we're depriving ourselves of silence, of both audio and visual. If there's always something else, where's the gap moment? Where's the chance for the Holy Spirit to be received? So thank you for carving out the time today. Join me please in a closing prayer, and then we'll send you out with a rousing round of applause for these great folks, please.